Hey everyone, I can't make it to the community meeting tonight at my sister's room. I didn't find out about it until last night, and I already have work for this evening. So I did want to make a few comments as a former executive director of Atlanta Pride and someone who was employed by the organization for 12 years and who honestly, like I, contrary to popular belief, I love Pride. Pride is extraordinarily important to me, and it's why I have a tendency to offer criticism. It's why when the community criticized me, I showed up to meetings and let folks yell at me, right? Like, that's what working in the community is. And I am so disappointed with the lack of community engagement by the current leadership of Atlanta Pride. There are no perfect answers in how to handle the discontent that some of you are feeling. And I want to validate that because I know how hard some of you tried to just express basic criticisms of the current administration and how it's largely been ignored. So first, that disappoints me. But I am so happy that people are finding their footing and they're finding new parameters of what pride is, and putting your own energy and time into making something happen for the community. So I'm very appreciative of that. Having said all that, I will say that I don't think the right answer is to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I don't think that the Atlanta Pride Committee needs to go away. And here's why. That organization has attached to it an employer identification number, the EIN. That EIN is the thumbprint of the organization. It's how the federal government, state and local governments, funders, sponsors, that is the historical infrastructure and the historical connections and the grandfathered in status for certain things involving large events with the city. That is specific to that EIN, that thumbprint. So is it possible to start something brand new and have something brand new? Absolutely. Is it going to be harder without that historical infrastructure, without that EIN? Yes, and here's why. Sponsors, especially like with these renewal contracts, the sponsors who are kicking in the most money for Pride to happen, to pay for the things like porta-johns and stages and entertainers, and tents and all the various things that go into paying for Pride. Those sponsors write the big checks, yes, because it's a great marketing opportunity, but also if they have historically done business with the same organization, there's a level of trust there when they go to whoever their higher up is to get that signature and get that final approval for sponsorship. It can be done without it, but what I want you to know is that there's an avenue to this that doesn't involve having to burn the whole thing down. And I hope folks at least try. And to be specific, here's how you can try. The reason folks don't feel represented with Atlanta Pride is because there is a cult of confidentiality that is driven by the current executive director and the current board. People who do anything with Pride as members are told repeatedly that they're not allowed to share information. They're made to sign these ridiculous non-disclosure agreements. and volunteer. I mean, literally, the volunteers of Atlanta Pride basically say, we'll never say anything disparaging about the organization. I mean, that's essentially what folks are having to sign on to say, simply to be able to just volunteer, right? And here's the thing about that. If I'm part of the community that's being served by the organization, and I volunteer and I see some stuff I don't like, I should be able to say that out loud. I should be able to say it to my friends. I should be able to say it to the communities I'm connected to. And here's why. This call of, oh no, Atlanta Pride's very inclusive, and look, you know, this person and that person are involved. Well, this person and that person, regardless of what community they represent, whether that's a community of color, whether there's trans people, whether it's both, whether there's people living with HIV, doesn't matter. If they aren't allowed to go back into the communities they serve and talk directly about their experiences and talk directly about policy changes, which we'll get to, that are happening with the organization, if they aren't able to do that, it is not inclusive, because none of us are a monolith, right? So just because you have one person in that room, my dog agrees, just because you have one person in that room that falls into a certain category doesn't mean that you're representing that category if they can't go have conversations. This cult of confidentiality with Atlanta Pride has set it to where if any conversation happens in a bar, it's automatically dismissed as like, oh, it's, that's gossip. There's this constant air of, if people are talking, it's gossip. And what I really want people to understand is that it isn't. You're not gossiping. We all deserve to say what it is that we want to see Pride be and become. We all have the right to say how Pride impacts us, our businesses, our organizations, our outreach messages, all of those things. Criticism is imperative in a healthy organization. Criticism is imperative in an ever-changing movement. If you want people in the room, but you don't want to hear the things that they have to say and the truths they have to speak, you didn't actually invite them into the room. So, we combine those two things. The fact that the organization itself does have some very strong historical value. It has infrastructural value. That committee members and board members should be able to freely speak amongst the community. Then let's take that third step. This is the one that's going to make me relatively unpopular with some people that I have known for years and years. On September 25th of this year, September 25th, at the Atlanta Pride meeting, they will hold a vote to change the bylaws. The bylaws that currently exist and that have existed since I started in the late 90s allows the committee membership to vote on board members. This bylaw change will remove that right, and Atlanta Pride will become a self-appointing board. Now, I understand that there are plenty of organizations with self-appointing boards, but when you're talking about an organization like Pride, who, number one, has decades of experience letting other people vote, and number two, an organization that is supposed to represent such a broad, robust community with all sorts of needs and voices and concerns, to limit the people who get to have a voice in that even further than it is already limited is a dangerous move. It is already next to impossible to have any board member that is currently on the board to vote them off. It is almost impossible. This will make it impossible. Right now, as it stands, the Atlanta Pride Committee, the board, already has a hand-selected group that gets to take all of the board member applications and whittle it down to whoever they want for whatever reasons they want. For example, the last election I got to vote in was in 2019. And in 2019, there were 8 available board seats. Yet there were only like 12 candidates, and 6 of those were returning board members, or at least 6 of those were returning board members, and 2 or 3 of those were already on the committee. Of the community members that weren't already in bed with Pride, they actually got to have their board application considered. I think it was 3. I think 3 people. For 8 seats. So, the 2 things that really need to happen, unless the decision is that the community really is just fine with Atlanta Pride eventually just, like, the formal Atlanta Pride Committee just eventually going away, the 2 things that I would beg you to do would be to lobby every current member of Pride, particularly the board members who should be listed on their website, and demand that bylaw change be dropped. They are a couple of months out from an actual board election. To change the rules about who gets to vote at the last minute is wrong. They have a board member, Glenn Paul Friedman, who works for Fair Fight, who works for Stacey Abrams' voting rights organization, and knows, Glenn Paul Friedman knows it is wrong to take the vote away from other people who already have it. It's wrong. So, I'd encourage you to reach out to Glenn Paul, and I'd encourage you to tell him that. I would highly encourage each of you to lobby the organization hard in having that bylaw change dropped, or at bare minimum, tabled until after this current election is done. 1. 2, lobby the organization to either dissolve the nominating committee and allow everyone that is qualified that submits a board application to be considered on the ballot. If you meet the minimum requirements, you should be considered. And if they're not going to do it that way and they are going to have the nominating committee, then what I also think, then what needs to happen instead is they need to be upfront about exactly how many applications they received, exactly how many applications were eliminated and how many people ended up on the ballot, and why the applications that were thrown out were thrown out. The current leadership cannot continue to say that they have an open door and they are transparent and do this whole thing where they're like, oh, well, if you want to criticize the organization, why don't you join the board? And then make it impossible to join the board. Or why don't you become a member? And make it impossible to become a member. And make it impossible for now, or try to make it impossible for a member to actually vote. It's wrong. And I honestly believe that if a real free and fair Pride board election were to occur, that the community would immediately see dramatic change. So fill out a board application, lobby the organization. I hope the meeting goes well tonight, and please do not let Atlanta Pride change their bylaws on September 25th. Please do not allow them to do that. If you want any remnant of that organization to actually have sustainability and to be able to get through the hump that I hope we can all agree is occurring at this moment, if you want all the community infighting to start to be tamped down, if that's what you want, then policy change and working through that is, I think, a path. I could be wrong, but I think it's a path. So I really do. I encourage each and every one of you, please lobby the organization against the bylaw change that will remove membership as their right to vote on board members and will make them a self-appointing board. Please lobby them on full and complete transparency around the nominating committee, who's on the committee, how many applications were received, how many made it to the ballot, and why. What were the general reasons in which anyone who wasn't considered did not get the right to make it to the floor to speak their piece, to be considered for a position. And please apply yourself. Apply for the board. Are you going to make it onto the board? Probably not. Not if everything stays the way it is and the way they have the system set. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't apply. Okay? The more people that apply, the harder it is for them to explain why they eliminated people and why there were so few candidates on the ballot. So, that's my piece. Not a terribly popular guy, and I'm assuming this probably doesn't make me that much more popular. But it is what it is, and right is right, and wrong is wrong. It's wrong to remove the right to vote, and they have board members that should know that pretty dang well. All right, I love y'all, and good luck.